Hello, my name is Daniel Yuck. Thank you for watching my video today. I appreciate your time. In today's video, I want to share with you how I go about tattooing a fingerprint tattoo. If you have any questions at any point throughout this video, I'm going to encourage you to drop a comment down below. I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring that bell for me, as I'm going to be bringing more videos like this for you all. I do also have social medias under the same name as my YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I would truly appreciate the support over there as well. If you enjoy my content and find my channel helpful, consider checking out my Patreon, as you might find some useful content over there. With that being said, let's dive straight on into this. Taking it from the very top, when it comes to fingerprint designs, a couple of things that I'm considering off the bat are the intricacy within the design and the application for the healing results. Fingerprints are a great example. When we have fingerprint designs, there tends to be a lot of dense lines and details going on really close to one another. So I'm going to want to compensate throughout the tattoo application process for this to ensure that these lines don't bleed over time, so that way we still have that fingerprint integrity even years down the road. That is something to consider when we're dealing with any tattoos that have a lot of details and or dense lines together. So here I have some stencils printed out. Here I have some fingerprint designs, and it really varies on the design as well. You can see that these two designs right here tend to be a bit more blotchy, where these two right here, we have a lot more detail. These are the same designs, these are just smaller, and then these are larger right here. So two ways off the top that I can go about compensating for a cleaner healing tattoo is to either enlarge the design just a little bit, so that way we still hold true to a fingerprint and it's not enlarged like this. Although if the client didn't mind a larger fingerprint, that's fine as well. It's going to be really subjective to each their own, but you can see that there are different designs. It would be subjective which one the client would want to go for. For me personally, I would just want to enlarge the original fingerprint just a little bit, so that way I can get more detail and it heals better over time. Another thing that I can think about going about compensating for this much detail is using a smaller needle configuration, maybe like a butt pin 3-round liner and below, maybe even a 1-round liner if we're comfortable using that small of a needle configuration. So off the bat, these are a couple of ways that we can go about compensating to create a better tattoo. So here are the designs close up. I just wanted you to see what type of detail we're working with when it comes to fingerprint designs. And keep in mind, what makes this read as a fingerprint design is exactly all of those details. So when it comes to this sort of tattoo, we have to be extremely accurate, and we also have to have a good stencil along the way. And when I say extremely accurate, we have to be accurate with where we're applying the ink, so that way it reads when we're done as a fingerprint. As I showed you earlier here, you can see that this design and this one right here have a lot of blotching going on, and it's kind of unreadable. This is, for me, not workable. These are two stencils that I personally would not want to use, where we have these right here with more open details, as you can see. Allow me to zoom in here. And then we have these with more open details right here and more open space. So I could apply this with, let's say, a 1-round liner, take my time and just deposit small amounts of ink at a time along the way until I've completed the tattoo. And I've also enlarged them down here to capture more detail. And again, this is going to be fully subjective, but me personally, I wouldn't feel totally comfortable tattooing a fingerprint the original size that it came in. I would want to enlarge it a little bit more for long-term healing purposes. And this is something that I would also explain to the client. Making a fingerprint design is actually fairly easy. You can even use the carbon paper from a tattoo stencil, put a thumb on there, and then transfer it to paper. Maybe you could even put a little bit of like a Greek card or some sort of stencil applicant lightly, press it down, and then press it down on paper, and kind of repeat the process until you get clean fingerprints on your end. But that is one way that you can go about creating fingerprints per person. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and switch on over to a different angle, so that way we can begin the actual tattooing application process. I want to start with letting you all know the gear that I'm using here. So I am using a barbell tattoo armrest stand with a tattoo station. I will leave links for you to everything that I'm sharing with you here down below in the description, so you can check it out on your end. I am using a small piece of Reelskin fake skin. This is placed down with Spirit stencil paper, and I did print it with the MHTP 8008 thermal printer. And this is a fingerprint tattoo right here. Here I have a green card. I use green card to apply the stencil I'm going to be using the Ambition Mars U tattoo machine for this tattoo right here. I'm probably going to set it to the 4mm stroke and leave it there the entire way. Probably running at around maybe 5 volts, 5.5, somewhere in this time or somewhere in this voltage range. And then I'm going to be using either an Inkclaw 0403 round liner or an Amala, I think this is going to be the standard 1 round liner. So I haven't fully thought about which route that I'm going to go yet, but it's going to be definitely one of these two. I am also going to be using dynamic black tattooing ink to apply this tattoo right here with some simple petroleum jelly because we are tattooing on fake skin. So now that we are familiar with the gear that I'm going to be using here for this demonstration, let's switch on over to a different angle. Let's get you a close-up view. So here is a close-up look at the fingerprint design, and you can see that there is a lot of dense detail here. This is something that we're going to have to be really precise when we're depositing the pigment into the skin. So for me personally, I would rather go with the 1 round liner just because I feel a little bit more comfortable. But again, using a smaller, let's say buckpin 3 round liner could be done as well. I just would not feel comfortable using, let's say, a 00 or even standard 3 round liner on up. I would just stay away from those sizes and try to go to a smaller size. But before we go ahead and use the smaller size, we want to make sure that we're comfortable with them because of these dense details. We have to think about when the tattoo heals. When the tattoo heals, we want it to hold true to that fingerprint integrity. We don't want any blurring, or we want as minimal bleeding and settling as possible after it's healed. When we take a close-up look at both of the needles, this needle right here is the Inkclaw 0403 round liner, and this is the Amala standard 1 round liner. You can see that the needle sizing is pretty darn close. If anything, the Inkclaw 3 round liner, the 0403 round liner from Inkclaw, looks a bit thinner off the bat. I can't be too sure. However, these would pretty much produce the same results. So instead of going with the 1 round liner, I'm going to start with the 3 for these larger areas right here and work my way to see what results I get. Should I need to change, I'll go ahead and do so along the way. So here we are, I'm running the Inkclaw 0403 round liner with the Ambition Mars U tattoo machine at 5 volts even. And that's my needle hang right there. I'm going to start from the bottom right here and work my way on up. One little tip that I'm going to relay here, or one trick that I want to give, is when we bring in ink to the tip, we want to do just a little bit. We don't need much. Keep in mind, we are going to be working in micro areas, so we don't need much at all. And the same thing with moisture. I'm just going to put a small amount of Vaseline along the way. We don't need much. And then from there, I'm going to begin applying the actual tattoo. You can see I'm just kind of going to work it up slowly. I'm using the very tip of my needle here. And I'm going to fill in all of the stencil that I see. I'm not going to make any up. I'm not going to try to wing it. I'm going to do just what's there. I want it to run at 5 volts as well to give me more time over the skin. So that's the reason why I chose to go with a lower voltage setting. The reason why I don't want to draw too much ink into my tube is because I want to be able to see at all times where I'm putting the ink. I don't want pulling to happen. And then I'm going to keep building up the tattoo. Although I'm using a smaller needle configuration, I still need to give time to the to the needle for it to work. I need to give time to the needle so that way I'm letting the needle do its thing. If we're combining the right pressure with the right voltage and right depth, then we're going to be able to get a few passes even using this small of a needle configuration. Want to be real mindful of all of the ink and where I'm putting it.
going back to the logic where I'm just placing in where I see ink, where I see the stencil. I'm not going to create what I don't see. And we have to also keep in mind that fingerprints are more organic, so there is a little bit more room for error. However, we still want to have the correct technical application and right approach with it. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put what I see and stay true to the organic fingerprint aspect of it. And to do that, I'm just going to be using small circular motions and whip motions in certain areas. We're really going for the basic application of saturation. We're not really going for shading or anything too advanced within this tattoo. You can see I'm just dabbing away lightly. And I'm just going to keep building on up. And again, I think it's really important that we're giving the needle time to do its job. We want the needle to be able to deposit the ink in a consistent manner where when we're done with the tattoo, it's going to read. And in order to do that, we have to understand how the needle works and let it do its thing when we're in there. So just run at consistent, slow, fluid motions using just a very tip, and we'll be on the right track. And then you can begin building up what you do see. So right here I do see it's a lot of distortion going on. However, since we're not getting a lot of pulling within the needle pulls, we're able to work cleanly and see what we're doing, which is a plus. Then I'm going to repeat that process right here. I do want to pay attention and make sure that I'm staying true to the fingerprint integrity while using an application to apply the tattoo that makes sense. So what I'm doing is I'm using a series of little circular motions to pack in certain areas, and then I'm using just faint, fine lining right here to get this part going. I wouldn't say fingerprint tattoos are necessarily easy, but what I would say is that their organic nature does leave room for interpretation. I think as long as we're staying true to that fingerprint aspect and it looks like the fingerprint when we're done, or like a fingerprint, then we're doing good. So I'm just following this down like so, you can see here, with just light lining until I've completed that area. And then we're going to repeat this process until we've done this area, and then we can move on up. I don't really want to move on up just yet. I want to focus in right here, right now. like so right here. And keep in mind, just do the best that you can. Don't focus on perfection and don't try to go for perfection. Focus on what's actually there and apply that and kind of build off of there. Take your time with the application. So a little bit more saturation to that area by just doing small circular motions. I was just adding some pixels there. So now I feel like this is pretty good right here. I'm going to continue to build on this area right here. And I'm going to start just adding what I see here. Don't want to deviate and go too far from the area that I be, but this is in the area that I'm working on already, so I'm going to start from this middle point and then kind of work my way around. I feel like that's a good way to go about it. And again, I'm just giving time to the needle, letting the needle do its thing. I'm not pressing it down too hard as I am using a small needle. It's going to be easy to puncture the skin, so we don't want to cause unnecessary damage. But the process is actually pretty straightforward. It's just really fundamental and basic. I think what's advanced is reading the stencil and applying it in a manner that's true to the fingerprint. Yeah, I really don't feel like doing this with a 3-round liner, a standard 3-round liner at this specific size would be a healthy way to approach it. There's just way too much dense detail going on for it to have been done with a smaller needle configuration. This would have to have been done with a 1-round liner or a bug pin 3-round liner like this one from Inkclaw, which is a 0403 round liner. So you can see I'm just using basic fundamentals to apply all of this, and the idea is once we apply this technically correct, when we're done we're going to get a nice fingerprint read. But keep in mind we're using such a fine needle that we should also experience minimal settling and bleeding in over time, which means that the tattoo in theory should withstand the test of time and hold its initial integrity over time. You kind of get the idea behind the process. It's actually pretty straightforward. And again, as I mentioned, the only advanced part is actually reading the design and staying true to the design as best as you can along the way. I'm going to keep filling in these areas like this because that's what I feel like the design is showing me here. I'm just trying to stay true to the design as best I can. You can see that there's not really much that I would want to say about the process because I just don't want to like talk endlessly for you all. I would rather much rather have you observe here along the way as well. I encourage you, if you have any questions, drop them down below, but you can get the idea. The process is actually pretty straightforward. It's just real technical. You have to be real precise with where you're placing down the ink, how much, you get the idea. All of that matters. What my main focus is though when I'm applying this tattoo is how it's going to heal long term. So let's say if this tattoo is 5 years old, I still want it to read as true to a fingerprint as I can get it to read. And I think a great way to do that would be to compensate and use a smaller needle to deposit ink in smaller areas and then kind of just build up from there. The areas where I feel like there needs to be a little bit more sculpting or adding on, I just do that along the way. I don't really try to overcomplicate the process, but again, more so just try to stay true to the integrity of the fingerprint. Fingerprints alone are not by any means perfect or symmetrical or anything like that. So in terms of being perfect, I'm not going for that. The only thing that I'm really focused on is my technical application. My technical application has to be correct. And I do think that it has to be correct for the longevity of this tattoo, so that way it could stand the test of time. even at this size, we have to understand when it comes to tattooing, it's going to be nearly impossible to do this tattoo exact as a stencil. Just because all of the detail may not have been captured within the stencil, there's just many reasons as to why it's not going to be exact. However, it's going to be very, very close and have an almost exact resemblance if we execute it correctly. So that right there is what I'm shooting for. I'm not trying to be perfect and or extremely exact, but what I am trying to do is have that integrity read over time while still applying the design that's there. And this part right here is kind of like dense, like this area, but I feel if we can get through this area right here, then we can get through this one too. So we're about halfway through now, and we're about 22 minutes into this tattoo, according to the Ambition Mars U. So far, so great. I think that if we're patient with the process, we're going to end up with a nice reading tattoo, but more importantly, we're going to end up with a nice reading tattoo that that withstands the test of time, which is exactly what we want. So for me personally, I would rather take my time up front, which is right now, and do a good job on this tattoo, so that way indefinitely it's there and the client could enjoy the tattoo for the rest of their lifetime, which is exactly what I think a healthy goal is for a tattoo. To each their own though. And that's kind of the process all the way through. And again, as I mentioned a couple of times already, that if I'm seeing parts of the design that I need to work along the way, I'm going to just work them as I go. I don't really feel like there's a set number of passes as to how many times we can go over something. You can see little detail by every little detail is how I'm building this tattoo. I'm doing the best that I can to read the tattoo to the best of my ability to apply all of these little dense details here. Now, I'm not necessarily going for perfection or full saturation either. I'm trying just to keep an organic feel. and just tattoo what I see. Much like an actual fingerprint, some areas are darker, some are lighter, and it's always in random areas, so I think that's another plus when we do fingerprint tattoos, that they're a bit more abstract, so it's easier, much more forgiving. And then we're just going to want to move on up over here and then just keep applying it. Nothing really changes throughout the tattoo but the area that we're doing. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit over here to kind of start meeting in the middle with everything. Alright, we're almost done. We're reaching the finish line here. One thing that I say, even on the follow-alongs within my Patreon, is when we're starting to reach the end of a design, this is where we actually want to be patient and practice the most patience, because as a tattoo artist, we get happier when we start reaching the end of the design, and therefore we could still drop the ball. Even though we still have a little bit left to go, it's definitely possible to still ruin a design by rushing at the end. So I'm still just going to keep my cool here, still going to remain patient along the way, and just finish it with the same level of patience that I've been tattooing with throughout this entire process. And then at the end, when I'm done, we can go ahead and do some last touch-ups or finalize any last minute details that I feel we should finalize, and kind of just continue from there. In theory, my theory is by depositing pigment with a smaller configuration and in a more controlled manner, over time the integrity is going to hold true for a longer amount of time. And that's the theory behind it, because ink can only settle and bleed so far, or as much as there's in the skin. So if there is a certain amount of pigment within the skin, then I feel in theory it's only going to bleed to a certain amount and extent. So I feel like if the technical application is aligned when we apply the tattoo, then again it's going to hold the test of time. I think with any tattoo that's delicate like this, fingerprint tattoos, footprint tattoos, maybe even fine lettering, any tattoo that requires dense lining and detail, I feel should be approached very similar to how we're approaching this. Okay, so from here, now that I've applied the design there, I'm going to take a look at it, and then if there's any last minute adjustments or any last minute things that I want to add, I'm going to go ahead and do that now before the session is complete and the client walks out. And I feel like this is something that we should practice with each and every tattoo that we do. Just try to make sure everything is clean and consistent as you can possibly get it. Make sure all the areas are cleanly saturated, and it's going to be a bit more difficult to reach certain saturations, especially if we're moving too fast for our needle to do its job, as I mentioned earlier. So in some areas I did tend to move a little bit quicker than I should have, but that's what this last overlook is for. Alright, let me go ahead and give you a top view of the final result here.
So here are the final results on the fingerprint tattoo. When I read this tattoo right here, it definitely does look like a fingerprint to me. A few things that I kept in mind that were super important to me is the longevity of this tattoo. I didn't want it to look like a blob, or I didn't want it to look smudged or blurred over time. So therefore, I took into consideration the needle size and how much ink I was depositing into certain areas. I did go with a way smaller needle configuration, and I was running at a lower voltage, so that way I could be more patient and move slower depositing ink in certain areas. So for me personally, in theory, I'm feeling very confident that this tattoo would stand the test of time. I do love the way that it came out. It did come out nice, texturized, and again, I do have that fingerprint read that I was looking for. So there you have it. These are the results that I got. I do hope that you can take something and apply it to your tattooing on your end. However, should you have any questions at all, I encourage you to drop a comment down below, and I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring that bell for me, as I'm going to be bringing more videos like this for you all. I do have social medias under the same name as my YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I will truly appreciate the support over there as well. If you enjoy my content and find my channel helpful, consider checking out my Patreon, as you might find some useful content over there. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. You have a great day.